There is a reason, yes. Although I also notice my mouth is wide open.
Well, there's a flight.
All right, will you pray with me, please? Steadfast God, bless us with understanding, clear speaking, and open hearts to listen. May all we speak and hear be a reflection of your grace and love. Amen.
Amen.
So, Jeremiah was, well, not a bullfrog. Okay, I'm dating myself. He's a good friend of mine. Seriously, Jeremiah was acting as a prophet should, demonstrating God's truth to the people. So by purchasing that field, he was, even though Israel was about to be invaded, he was showing us that, sorry, I've lost my place here. There we are. He demonstrated God's truth. So he was demonstrating his faith that God would care for Israel, that the field would one day be cultivated by Jeremiah's heirs. See, in the way that Israel's laws treated land purchases, you first had to offer it to your family, because you tried to keep the land within your family, within Israel. So you would go to a distant cousin before you'd sell it to a stranger. That was the law. So Jeremiah was saying that this isn't the end of the story, that there's more to come. This was in the face of war, of invaders, foreign conquerors about to take over Jerusalem itself. And if you remember, not only did they conquer, they carried off all the riches of the temple. They tore down the altar, and they took the Ark of the Covenant. They took all the jewelry and everything that people had, and they took the people themselves, especially the rulers and the leaders of the people, and carried them all off to Babylon. And in spite of this, but that's just what they did, right? So they knew what was facing them. So in spite of this awful prospect, Jeremiah is offering hope. Someday, he's saying, someday we will be back. This defeat will not last forever. There is a future. And this is a message of hope and faith that has sustained, it not only sustained the ancient Hebrews in Babylon, but European Jews during the Holocaust. The book of Jeremiah was a very popular reading in the concentration camps. Black Americans throughout their history, since 1619 and before, and many other oppressed people, as well as anyone facing difficulties. That even though things look bleak, it is not the end. Even when things seem to be at their worst, there is still hope. We will return to this city. We will have our rights. Our people will survive and even flourish. And what's more, Jeremiah wasn't simply making promises. He wasn't just prophesying that this would happen. He wasn't just saying, oh no, you'll come back, we'll come back, our people will live, we'll survive, we can get through this. He was living out that promise by that faith, by taking action, by purchasing that field. He could have just preached, right? He could have bought a house or another building in the city. But he bought a field, claiming a stake in the land itself and in caring for the land. Well, that's Jeremiah. Now, some of you may remember an old song, Rock My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham. Rock, anybody remember that one?
No.
Okay, camp song.
Hello.
Oh, dear. Anyway, there is a song that goes like that. You know, rock my soul in the bosom of Abraham. And that's where that comes from, but if you don't know the song, then okay, moving on. But that ostracized person finding comfort with Abraham, right? The patriarch. So here is Abraham speaking truth to the rich man. He'd been told in many ways, the rich man had, to be kind to those less fortunate, to poor people and widows. It was a constant theme in the prophets, taking care of widows and orphans and being kind to those less fortunate. But he had to, even though Lazarus, who's clearly in need, was right there on his doorstep. He had every opportunity to help Lazarus, but he did not. For whatever reason, whether it was arrogance or that Lazarus was simply invisible to him, or he scorned him and thought it was all Lazarus' fault, or whatever the cause, he did not offer the help that Lazarus needed and deserved. And Abraham tells him his brothers won't listen either, because they heard the same messages that he did, right? So they're not going to pay any attention. If the rich man who had Lazarus right there on his own doorstep didn't do anything, then how does he expect to convince his brothers, who, as I said, have had the same life experiences that he had, and they didn't even have Lazarus there to remind them. So there's a gulf between those who are marginalized and those who can help. Of ignorance, of shame, of bigotry, disdain maybe, arrogance. And there is indeed a wide chasm between us and those that we don't care for, or who don't care for us, because we're sort of on both sides of that aren't we? And it must be bridged in the here and now. That chasm divides us from those we look down on and those who look down on us. The truth is that most people have characteristics that someone else finds distasteful, shaming, hateful, or just not something they want to be involved with. Those other people may be considered too old, too young, too big, too small, too gay, too straight, too rich, too poor, too needy, too ill, too thin, whatever. They've never been married, or they're divorced, or they have too many kids, or their child was born outside of marriage, or they've been in prison, or they weren't born in the U.S., or their parents weren't. They have too much education, they're elitists, or they don't have enough education. You know, humans can find all kinds of reasons to distance themselves from other people. We really can. And yet it is clear what we should be doing for each other. Simple humanity tells us, as well as direct commands and comments and suggestions and so on from the prophets, from God, from Jesus, caring, feeding, clothing, sharing companionship. And there are many ways to do these things. Direct action, like volunteering at food pantries or shelters, getting involved in recycling and so on. And there's advocacy, such as support of organizations working to care for the homeless, for hungry or incarcerated people, working to protect the environment. And we can communicate with governmental representatives and local governments. We can speak at village meetings and even get elected to village boards. We can offer support to people doing direct advocacy and direct action. And people doing this work are not just activists and politicians and volunteers, although those are the people we might think of first. The ones creating new laws or improving existing ones, testifying to lawmakers, marching in protests, and so on. But advocates are also medical researchers, public defenders, artists, chaplains, social workers, writers, teachers, chefs, farmers. They know firsthand the needs of people who are ill, or are earning minimum wage, or incarcerated. They can speak and write and paint and draw these truths to share with those who don't know, who haven't seen the other stories. We know our story, don't we? We know what we have been through, what we have survived. But we don't always know the other stories unless we're told, unless we learn. What was it like to be the only Native American in the college dorm? How did the chef make it through training when she could barely read? What are the struggles of the clients of the social worker in the small town? How did the brightest member of the class end up in prison with a life sentence? These are stories we may be able to tell, or maybe we need to hear. They are the stories that can bridge that gap and bring us together in understanding. Now, a lot of this sounds like, excuse me, one of my favorite drums, social justice. You know, I'm used to hearing that from me. But there's more to this than social justice. This is about survival of life on the planet, our own humanity, mutual understanding, and human life. As we understand each other and care for each other, we will want to work for everyone's good, which means healing the planet, making sure everyone has what they need, both materially, like food, clothing, water, shelter, but also health care, mental and physical, in education, in opportunities to learn and grow and work. We won't make it in our lifetimes, I'm afraid, but we can certainly make a start and lay that foundation, build on what we have. If we want it for ourselves, we must want it for our neighbor as well. And our neighbors are every human being. In all God's names, amen.